Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Eczema Warrior podcast. I am in a new space. We actually have an office space at the house that I'm living at with my friends and my family. And we haven't been using it because it's not set up properly yet, but we're currently in the process of making it look nicer. So anyways, I just wanted to share that because we are now in a new space. It felt really nice recording in my bedroom, but I could also hear people on the outside, and I'm sure they can hear me podcast as well. So I'm like, let's choose a space where it's like more private. Not that I'm trying to hide anything from my friends, but I also don't want to be like disruptive and loud, especially because I work and record my episodes pretty early in the morning. So, where should we start? I guess the title of this episode, this YouTube video, is my childhood story. And usually when I record podcast episodes, I have a bunch of notes, I'm prepared with like everything I want to say. And it's mostly because when I'm sharing episodes, teaching you guys tips, teaching you how to heal your skin, how to heal your gut, foods, good for your gut, things like that. I want to make sure I don't miss anything and I give you as much as I can. Now, I thought it wouldn't be a good idea to do that with my childhood story because I want it to flow better. And if things I remember that I want to share, I can share. If things I don't remember, that's okay, right? Just want it to be more fluid, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess before we get into today's episode, I'll just do a quick life update just because last week's episode, I shared about my mental health journey this entire year and how it's been a lot of ups and downs, especially with how I'm feeling about myself and the direction that I'm heading. Like I'm just very confused and lost, but over the past couple months, I would say, like things have gotten a lot better in terms of like how I feel. I've been doing a lot of therapy. I see my amazing therapist either weekly or bi-weekly. I invested in this spiritual healing program. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Margot. Margot is my spiritual healer. She has over 30 years of spiritual practice, energy healing, and there's something so beautiful about being in a group setting. And I didn't personally actually like realize this because obviously for my business and for my coaching, I'm the one facilitating the group. I'm the one that's helping the clients. I'm the practitioner, right? So being on the other side and actually being the client in this group program, the spiritual healing program with Margot, it's so empowering. It's so interesting that whenever you're going through something emotionally, you're going through tough times in your life, you're struggling with like right now, like my identity, like what am I doing? What's my purpose, right? I'm not the only one experiencing these things. And oftentimes we don't realize that you're not alone in this journey. There's other people who obviously don't have the exact same thing you're going through because we all have our own journeys, but people feel the same feelings that you're feeling. It's like a collective experience. And this is something that I'm really learning right now in this program where it's like, I don't feel like I have a really clear direction right now, but that's okay. There's people in the program that also feel the same way as well. It's okay to feel lost. It's okay to feel like I don't have it all together, because not everyone does. And that's normal. If you see people like appearing like they have it all, they have all the money, have all the relationships, they're living the dream life, that might not be completely true, right? You never know what someone else is going through, and it could all seem picture perfect, which is kind of like how I felt in my journey, just because I was afraid of what people were thinking about me, or I was afraid that if I showed the vulnerable side of me that people would judge. Anyways, I could go off about this like program and my experience in it, but I just want to say like being in a group program can really make a big difference in terms of where you're at with your healing journey. And I'm finding it very helpful. I'm very empowering and impactful right now with my journey. So that's a bit of a life update. Doing a lot of like mental health work, mindfulness, spending a lot more time with my family and with my friends. And, that was something I didn't do much of over the past few years because I was so focused on my business. But now it's really teaching me that your business and your career and success, quote unquote, is nothing if you don't have solid relationships. And so that's what I'm learning. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Where do I start, guys? My childhood story. First of all, let me just touch on like why this is important for your journey itself to understand how your childhood was, because everything that you're experiencing right now in your life, your emotions, how you react to things, the people in your life, the career that you have, your experiences in general, it's always linked back to your childhood and how you were raised and how you were brought up and what your parents taught you as you became an adult. In the very first episode of my podcast, I talked about my story in terms of my eczema and TSW journey. By the way, if you haven't listened to the episode, highly recommend checking it out if you want to learn more about my skin journey over the past 3 decades, which is basically all my life because I've had eczema all my life. But my childhood story actually impacts the reason why I have eczema and why I get flare-ups when I'm triggered, when I'm around my parents, things like that. So I'll be sharing a little bit more about how my eczema is linked to my childhood experiences. And when I'm sharing with you this episode, I want you to reflect on your childhood and see if there's a connection between what is going on in your reality at this very moment to the things you're experiencing when you were young. So just keep that in mind as you're listening to my episode. So in my childhood, I came from a very, very strict Asian family. By the way, I'm going to be sharing probably the deepest, most vulnerable things that I've experienced in my childhood that I never even really talked about to my friends. So this is actually a really big deal for me to share this live, but I think, all the things that I share on my podcast is not for you guys to feel sorry for me or anything like that. That's not the whole purpose of it. It's for you guys to get to know a little bit more about why I am the way that I am, why I started my business, why I do what I do, why I love what I do, and just being me, like Julia, being myself, which is like the area that I'm in. It's just understanding why I am the way that I am, how this affects the way that I show up on social media. So it's all related. So growing up, I came from a very strict Asian family, and it was very physically abusive and emotionally abusive. I don't really have the best memory when it comes to exactly what happened in my childhood. Actually, my friend who lives in the house with me, she remembers more than I do. And she's like, Julia, how do you not remember that dad used to beat you like a lot, And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's just when you had so much trauma growing up as a child, as you get older, you just like brush it under the carpet. So you don't remember a lot of things. So growing up in a family where it was very physically and emotionally abusive, it was really hard for me. My parents immigrated from Taiwan to Canada back in 1993. So I was actually born in Taiwan and came to Canada at a very young age, 6 months old. I have an older sister. She's 5 years older than me. And I have a little sister who is 9 years younger. So a bit of an age gap between all the 3 sisters. So when we came to Canada in 1993, my parents obviously wanted us to have a better life in Canada. They wanted us to have good education and get a good career. That's the whole reason why they left Taiwan, our home country, to live in Canada. And so I'm very grateful that my parents always wanted a better life for my sister and me at that time, my older sister Louise. But despite them having good intentions to want us to have a better life, both my sister and I had a really rough childhood. My dad used to be very strict on both of us. He was very strict on my older sister, wanting her to learn traditional Chinese medicine. I remember her studying and being forced to study Chinese medicine, and she would get beat for it if she didn't study or if she didn't obey to his rules, which is like study every day and don't do anything else. As for me, it was similar, except that I was forced to learn piano and I was forced to stay home. And this probably started around in my teenage years. I would say grade maybe 7 or 8. What is that? Like age 13 or 14 was when my dad started to, he was always really strict, but that was when he was like, okay, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna learn piano, and that's the only route you're gonna take. You have to be a piano teacher when you grow up because that's the job that's gonna make you rich. It's a very easy job, it's a good career. It was all about having money, and it was all about being successful and having a good life. He's like, if you become a piano teacher, you're gonna make good money, you're gonna live in a nice house. And so that was the vision that he wanted. But my parents never asked me what I wanted to do. And obviously at that time, the age of 13, like I had no idea what I wanted to do, but that was like their dream goal was for me to become a piano teacher and for my older sister to be a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner. But we both fucking hated it. I hated practicing piano. I was forced to practice, and if I didn't practice, I would get beat for it. The abuse was really bad. It was like traumatizing. What I had to do when I was younger is if I didn't listen to my dad, he would make me kneel on my bare knees on the cement. Sometimes cement would have like little rocks on it. 8 hours a day. He would make me kneel on the cement. And in Chinese, we call it fa gui, which is like you have to gui. Gui is like you kneel. And fa is like punishment. And so I had to fa gui, if I didn't listen. If I didn't practice piano, if I didn't study. There were times where that would be so painful. I would be bawling my eyes out because I'm a child. I'm kneeling bare knees, not even like pants, okay? Bare knees on cement with rocks on it sometimes. So it was painful. I would get bruised for it. And then if I really pissed off my dad, he would hit me at the same time I was kneeling. We used to get beat with like wooden sticks, hangers. He'd backhand us, like anything that he had in his hands that he could hit us with, that's what we would get hit with. And so growing up in a household where and I'm saying we because this also happened to my older sister too, is like we never had a say in anything. Like we didn't have a voice. We couldn't make decisions because every decision that we tried to make was wrong. If I wanted to do something outside of piano, no, not possible. The only way is for you to listen to me and learn piano. So I couldn't say anything. I couldn't make decisions. I couldn't actually cry because if I cried, that was a sign of weakness. And my dad taught us like, you shouldn't cry. Like, why should you cry? In Chinese saying, it's kusama. Like, why are you crying? Like, there's no reason for you to cry because you should be listening. So you have no right to cry. So obviously very traumatizing, we were told we had to be a certain way, we have to act a certain way, we had to do a certain thing for him, which is learning piano, learning Chinese medicine. And then at the same time, while that was happening, we also couldn't have emotions. So imagine that as a child for many, many, many years in your life where you couldn't speak, you couldn't say, you couldn't make decisions. If you tried to talk back, if you tried to say something that you want to just express your feelings or express your thoughts, like it was just wrong all the time. So it was really hard to be a child of my parents at that time. Not only this, my parents were strict with like me trying to get me to be an obedient child so I could be successful. That was like their vision, right? Their goal. They also hated all of my friends. Like I really missed out my teenage years up until I was like 20. But when I was 20, that's when I went through TSW. So I like went through a lot of times in my life where I couldn't do stuff. And in my teenage years, from like 14 up until I was like 19, my dad disliked all of my friends. They thought everybody was malicious. They thought everybody didn't do anything good for me. They just didn't like any of my friends. And whether he was right or wrong, doesn't really matter. It just isn't fair to not let your kid go out and be herself and do what she likes to do, During those times, like I could not go out. I was not allowed to go to parties. I was not allowed to go out in general. If I were to go out, he would have to know exactly who I'm with, their phone numbers, would need to know their parents' phone numbers. It was so much stress that I didn't even want to go through that just to go out. So I would just stay home. I'm like, what's the point of like going out and enjoying my time with my friends if my dad is just gonna like be controlling and have to know everything, right? So I spent a lot of my teenage years just at home. And my friend Nikki, who's known me since during those years, and I'm with her today, we're still good friends today. She was like, dude, we tried so hard to sneak you out of the house, but we never could. You missed out on so many like parties and events and all these things with your friends because your dad wouldn't let you go out. And I can see why he was doing that because like at that time, my friends like liked to party and they liked to like have fun and stuff like that. And he was like, you're not going to be successful hanging around with people that go out and have fun is basically was his mindset. And to be fair, there was a time in my life where I did go out a lot. It was when I was grade 8. And this is kind of like a crazy story in itself, but I got myself in a situation where I was drinking heavily with a bunch of older people at that time. So I was grade 8 and I was hanging out with grade 12s. If you guys can relate, when you're grade 8 and you're hanging out with grade 12s, you think you're so cool. So at that time, I was hanging out with grade 11s and 12s, and I was like drinking with them, and I got myself in shit. I drank way too much. Like, I think I downed a whole bottle of Smirnoff. Disgusting, by the way. And the cops came and they were chasing all of us because we were drinking outside at a park. Because at that age, the spot where you party was at the park. So the cops came, I blacked out, I fell into the bushes. My friends all left me at that time. They all ran off. A couple found me in the bushes puking backwards, like choking on my own puke. I don't remember any of this, by the way. I was blacked out. Ambulance came, they took me to the hospital. I remember waking up at the hospital being like confused where I was getting my stomach pumped, had an IV going in me, and I was like, call my older sister, trying to get Louise to save me, but she was not legal enough to help me out of that situation. So anyways, I got myself in very deep trouble with my parents because of that. Basically almost died from alcohol poisoning and puking on myself in the bushes. And then of course, because all my friends left me, they were like, you have fucked up friends that would do that to you. And so ever since then, that was the whole catalyst as to why my parents stopped letting me go out, because of that situation. And I understand that, like, they were just trying to protect me, but it was to the point where I could never go out. I could never do anything, I could never go out. I would get screamed at, I would get yelled at if I like wanted to do something. So even though that was a very traumatic experience for me and my parents, I felt that they kind of took that out of hand to the point where I was like getting beat and had a very strict childhood leading up to I was like age 19, you know, like it was just a little bit too much. And so anyways, that experience led to my parents becoming more and more strict as I got older. A lot of the abuse, the physical abuse, emotional abuse. The physical abuse and emotional abuse came from my dad because he wanted me to be successful and he wanted me to listen to him. My dad would say a lot of like mean things to us as kids. If he was mad about something, my dad has a temper. Obviously he was going through some of his own stuff too and taking it out on us kids, but he would say very hurtful things to us. I wish I never had you as kids. You guys were the biggest disappointment in my life. You guys are useless. And so when you're told these things and when your parents are the only ones that take care of you, because obviously when you're at that age, you rely on your parents for like support, food, a house, money, but you're told these things, you will end up believing that. And this makes so much sense as to why this year I have been feeling those exact feelings about myself, because that's all I got when I was younger, right? I was never praised for anything. I was never told I was doing amazing, like you're doing a great job. There's no love, unconditional love. My parents' way of showing love, and this is very common actually in Asian family, is tough love. I'll wash your dishes, I'll make you food. Like acts of service was my parents' way of showing love. It was never words of affirmation. It was never anything like that. If anything, it was obviously abuse. My therapist actually used the word torture. She's like, your parents tortured you. And I was like, ooh, that's a really harsh word, but I guess. I mean, I never really saw it as torture because I don't know, maybe I just been conditioned to think that like that's how Asian parents are. They're just fucking strict. And so, you know, I didn't get any of that praise growing up. It was always like not good enough. Do more. You need to get straight A's. You need to be the #1 performer in piano. You need to win all the awards. You need to be the best of the best. Failure is not a thing. You have to show up even if you're suffering inside. Nobody can know that you're suffering inside because emotions are not real. You shouldn't be vulnerable. You shouldn't show that you're struggling because that is a sign of weakness. So I've been told that since I was young. This makes so much sense as to why I feel that I'm not good enough sometimes when it comes to social media. I feel that I'm not doing enough. I feel that I'm not providing enough value. I'm seeking that external validation from you guys. And it sounds so insane, but I understand why. It's because I never got that when I was a child. I was never told that I was doing amazing. I had to tell myself that, but like, How the fuck can I tell myself I'm doing amazing when my parents are telling me I'm useless? It's hard to do that, to believe in yourself, especially at that young age. You don't know about mindset. You don't know about self-worth. You're just gonna believe what your parents tell you because they're the ones that raised you. So of course you're gonna listen to your parents. So I didn't know anything about how to believe in myself or how to know that I'm doing great. Like, Julie, you're doing amazing. Like, I used to fucking win awards in piano. Like, I would go to piano contests, and I would win first place. Like, it's crazy because you guys probably think what the hell? Julie was a musician? Yeah, I was. Like, I used to win first, second place in playing piano. I played a Chinese instrument called pipa. Pipa is we call it in Mandarin. And I would travel, not around the world, but I would go around Vancouver at that time. I would travel down to Seattle and perform in a whole orchestra. I would perform by myself, and I learned pipa in a year. I remember my teacher being like, pipa is not an easy instrument to learn, but I literally jumped from level 0 or level 1 or whatever, beginner, to level 10 within a year, which is crazy. So my parents pushed me to learn these things, and obviously, I'm grateful that I did such an amazing job with learning piano, getting my level 10 certificate, learning pipa, learning guzheng. That was the other instrument that I learned. So I'm very grateful they taught me to be disciplined and they taught me to work hard. But it was at the expense of my self-worth. It was at the expense of my health. It was at the expense of my mental health, right? Because I would get beat if I didn't do well. I was never praised for how well I was doing. I was always not good enough. And at the same time of doing this, I had to do well in school academically. My parents actually didn't really check my grades in high school, which I'm really surprised because my dad's actually very smart. He used to be a math teacher back in Taiwan. But because how I was raised, I always wanted to do the best out of the best with everything. So while I hated piano, I could never be the best of the best in piano because when you hate something, you're not going to do well in it, right? But I did well considering how I was raised. But in school, I would study like a crazy person. I spent a lot of time during lunch breaks because I didn't have a lot of friends in high school, which also is related to the fact that I always felt not good about myself because of my family dynamics. So I didn't feel like I fit in with friends. I spent a lot of my lunches studying in the library, getting good grades, getting straight A's in high school, and just doing the best, trying my best to do really well in school. While I was learning piano, I was doing a lot of things at the time. But, a healthy family would have been praising, I'm so proud of you, you're doing amazing. Words of affirmation, love. But my family was never enough. It's not good enough. You're not doing enough. You're useless. I didn't have a choice at the time because some people might be like, why didn't you just not do those things? You're not good enough. Because I would get a fucking smack if I didn't do those things, right? So it was a very hard place for me during that time of my life. And at the same time, I was dealing with eczema. Thankfully, at that time in my life, my eczema was never that bad. If you listen to my story in episode 1, it was because I was on topical steroids all my life. And so that was being suppressed by topical steroids. And then I had a lot of trauma growing up at home. Not to forget my relationship with my mom. My dad was physically and emotionally abusive. My mom was emotionally abusive. She was really scary. She would say a lot of mean things to my older sister and I. Not so much to my younger sister anymore because my younger sister was born so much later than us. So she had a whole different childhood growing up. But she would also say the same things too, I regret giving birth to you. Oh my gosh, I feel so bad sharing this as a disclaimer. I never want to talk bad about my parents. This is just me sharing my experience. I have forgave them and there's a moth. There's a moth in here. If you guys see it flying around. I forgave them and I now have a better relationship with my parents. I'm learning in therapy that the reason why that they were the way they were is because parents carry their own traumas. Generational trauma gets passed down. They went through their own stuff growing up as a child. My mom had a very difficult childhood. My dad, I don't know too much about, but I'm sure. And so I understand. I understand that they were the way they were because of how they were raised. So I can't blame them entirely for their aggression, for the way that they treated me. All I can do now is heal from that and understand that their intentions were to always help me become a good child, right? A good adult, have a good life. They had a hard life. And so I understand, and I'm never going to share this episode in a way where it's like, they did this to me, like I'm playing victim, like never. Like, this is just me sharing my experience so you guys can understand me a little bit more, right? Because we're in this era of like understanding Julia and like why she is the way she is and how this all relates to me being on social media and me doing my work, right? So anyways, I just want to put it out there. Going back to my mom always being very emotionally abusive. She was not as strict compared to my dad. Like my dad obviously was the one that was like, she can't go out, she can't do this, she has to learn this. My mom was the one saying the mean stuff too. Like she'd be like, I regret having you as kids. You guys do nothing for me. I hate you guys. Yeah, just not a lot of nice things to say to a child. There's a lot of other drama going on in the house as well. So like my mom and dad had like issues between themselves. Obviously, when your parents have issues, you're always going to be affected by them, even though they don't think that it's affecting you, because my parents used to always say, it's between us, like we're fighting between us. As a child, when you go through these experiences, they say from the age of, was it 3 to 7 or 5 to 7 is when your subconscious mind takes in the most things. And so everything that you learned from being taught by your parents and just like seeing and experiencing what is going on in your life, it becomes part of you. It is your beliefs. So if at that age, when it's most active, you kept seeing your parents fight over money, or you kept experiencing physical abuse or emotional abuse from your parents at that age, obviously like at any time in your life too, but particularly that age is when it's like you're learning the most. It affects you and your health as you get older into your adulthood. So if you were told that you were not worthy, if you were told that you're not good enough, that you were never doing enough, that is going to show up as an adult in some shape or form. For me, it is showing up now in my work, right? If I don't get the praise from you guys, then I feel like I'm not worthy and I feel like I'm not doing enough. And it sounds ridiculous, but I hope it makes sense now, to me at least, for sure, of why I am the way that I am. I'm working on it. But it makes so much sense as to in the beginning of my business, when I got so many DMs, post-COVID, online business was popping off. Like I got a lot of praise from you guys and it made me feel good. I was like, yes, like I'm getting praise, like I'm doing amazing and being told, right? Because I was never told that younger. But as soon as that went away, because that's part of social media, I'm not always gonna get like comments and DMs all the time. But this year particularly was like very different for me compared to 2020 and 2021. I lost my sense of worth. I lost my sense of identity. I lost just me, because I'm like, if I don't hear anything, who am I? What am I doing? And this was the whole like basis to my mental health journey, because I literally felt like I was nothing this year because I just wasn't hearing as much as I wanted to. But a healthy person, a secure person would be like, I don't need external validation. I trust in me and I have myself to know that I am worthy. I am deserving of everything that I want in life. I don't need someone else to tell me that I'm doing great, because I know deep in my heart and my soul that I am doing great. And I'm sure that I know that I am. Like I know that I'm fine, because I'm like healing from it now. I'm doing better. If I were to make a list of all the things that I've done for my clients and for my work, why wouldn't I be proud of myself? Why wouldn't I be like, I have done so much in the past 4 years. I made my first 6 figures in 8 months. I served hundreds of clients. I've changed people's lives. I started this podcast that I absolutely obsessed with and I love. I have a community of people that trust me, like my clients that work with me, that want to work with me. I have my current clients now. What more do I need? The lack that I feel that I always need something more comes from the fact that I was always told that I need something more. I always needed to make more money. I needed to look successful. I needed to become a doctor. I needed to become a pianist, right? Like it was always like something I needed to achieve. So I never slowed down to stop and smell the roses and just be like, I've done so much and I need to honor that. I need to appreciate that because I can never have more if I don't appreciate what I have now. That's something I'm learning a fucking lot this year, which is crazy. So it's been a long episode already, but I feel like I still have so much to share. Okay, I mean, I shared quite a bit in terms of like what my childhood was like. And yeah, my mom, she never really hit us. She was just mean to us. I was a lot of not being good enough for my mom either. And feeling like a burden. Like I always felt like a burden as a kid around my mom specifically. She never made me feel confident about myself. She never made me feel good about myself. Like I felt like her giving birth to me was just like the biggest regret of her life. I know now that's not the case because my parents are older and they understand now. I think my dad does. My dad definitely feels really bad about how he treated us. I don't know about my mom. My mom is a whole other thing. It was just really hard with my mom. She just made us feel really bad with like the things that we did. I could never ask my mom to give me a ride home, even if it was late at night. She would complain about me wasting her time and wasting her gas. So there were nights where I had to take a taxi home and it would be like a 10-minute drive for her and it would be like a $30 taxi ride. But because she didn't want to drive, because it was like too inconvenient for her, we had to figure it out ourselves a lot of the times. I think that made me a very overly independent woman today because I had always had to figure it out by myself. My sister and I delivered newspapers at the age of like 12 because we had to make money for ourselves. Like my parents obviously provided us a roof to live under and food to give us, which a healthy family should, but we never could buy anything. We had to make our own money. So we delivered newspapers at a young age. I started working at McDonald's when I was like 13 or 14. Money was always very hard in our life because my parents fought about money. My mom used to take things from us that we earned. We had to put locks on our doors in our house back home because both my sisters and I didn't want our parents to go through our stuff. So there was just a lot beyond just like the strictness and the physical stuff. It was just a lot of turmoil in the house, fear and anxiety and like hiding things and avoiding my parents because we were scared that they were going to take things from us and fending for ourselves, making our own money at a very young age, not having power to say things. Overworking was like a huge thing for us. I remember, oh my God, this is crazy. I remember being in my university years, so after high school, with all the stuff that was going on, that was when my parents toned it down a lot. My dad stopped beating us after high school. But because most of my high school years, I stayed home and I couldn't go out and I didn't have a lot of friends, which all links back to like how I felt about myself. I was not the popular kid in school, struggling to fit in high school. And so going into university, I already felt with all that trauma and abuse, like I just don't even know who I was. My vision at that time was to be a doctor and be very successful in life. So here's the other thing when it comes to having all this trauma in your life. I'm saying your life because I'm like, I hope this is applying to you, but maybe I should just say like me. So having all of this trauma in my life, I talked to my therapist about this. I could have gone two routes. I could have been a horrible child, rebellious, and went down the drug addiction route. Because when you have parents like this, that's how kids get into drugs. There's so much trauma and abuse in their lives, like they just resort to drugs to feel better. Me and my sister actually talked about this. We could have went that route of like partying and drinking and doing drugs and just being really bad kids after high school. But we actually chose the complete opposite route, which is crazy. We went the route of, I'm gonna work so freaking hard to prove everybody wrong, especially my parents. So I went the route of like studying my ass off, working my ass off, so I can prove to my parents that I am worthy, that I can be successful, that I can do things on my own. But the problem with these two routes is that they're extreme routes, right? I could go extreme with being a drug addict, or I could be extreme in being a workaholic and being successful. And that's the route that I chose. I don't regret it because I love my job, right? But what I'm saying here is I could have been a very bad kid, and so could have my sister. And it's crazy because my older sister is actually very successful too. She doesn't work for herself, but she has a very good career. She worked her ass off to get where she is today. I'm not saying that she doesn't have her problems. Like, she obviously has traumas too, because we both went through a lot, but she could have been on the streets. And I know that sounds really dramatic, like, really, come on, Julia, on the streets. But it's a thing, like with all the stuff that we went through, with the beatings and stuff, we could have just like escaped home and be like, fuck this, I'm gonna go figure it out on my own. And you're not gonna have money to figure it out on your own when you're at that age. So I could have very much been well on the streets, right? After university, my only thing that I had at the time was to just go to school and finish university and get a degree. I went to a very prestigious school, UBC. My parents had a lot of financial issues growing up as a kid. And so even though they put money aside for us, it's called RESP in Canada, educational funds for your kids, we were never given that because my mom would spend it, or it would just, I don't know. We basically, as kids, never were supported in school. I actually got into a lot of debt with my student loans because that was the only way for me to pay for my dietetics program and being in UBC, because my parents never helped us in school. That really made me create resentment for them, because it's like they want me to be successful, but they never helped me with it. But what they did pay for is like my piano lessons and like my pipa lessons, but I didn't actually really wanted to do that. So I don't know. In university, I spent years of trying to basically finish my degree and be successful and get a good job. That was a whole struggle in itself, because my eczema started to get a lot worse in university because of the stress from school. And then in 2015, when I was 22, right in the middle of university, is when I started to go through TSW. So I had all these years of being suppressed as a child, not being able to be me, going through university. Had a few years actually where I was able to go do stuff. When I was around the age 18 to like 22, I partied a lot. I went out a lot. I actually met my core group of friends in those years, because those are the only years that I could go out and do stuff. So I met like Callie, which is my best friend. She got married this year, and a bunch of other friends that I met during that time. But then I went through TSW when I was 22, and then I lost a few years from that. So all my life, I just been lost, basically suppressed as a child, and then going through TSW, which a lot of you who listen to this podcast, you know that TSW also puts your life on hold. So yeah, that's basically most of my childhood. TSW, you can listen to episode 1, but going back to why I'm sharing this childhood story is I'm not perfect, and I've come out to share my struggles this year. This is why. I've always been that person where it's like, I just get on with things. I've been through shit when I was younger, but I'm not going to be a victim, and I'm just going to get on with it and work hard and do my best, right? But it's interesting because it's done very well for me, where it's like I work, I do something that I'm passionate about, but that is only going to get me so far. There's going to be a time now where I do all these things and I don't feel good about it. And this is exactly what I'm feeling this year, right? It's like I'm doing the content, I'm posting the things, I'm seeing clients, but I feel lost, and I feel like I'm not doing enough, and it's slowly piecing together now. I'm feeling this way because of everything I just shared in the past 50 minutes. And so now what I'm working on is heavily doing a lot of healing and reflecting and tuning into my body and understanding that it's okay to not have it all figured out, It's fine, because this is part of the journey of understanding you, understanding me, and like healing. And by sharing this, I hope is helpful for you guys to relate to me a little bit, that I'm human too, and I go through the ups and downs, and it's not always rainbows and unicorns. And it might look like that on social media, because I had a time in my life where I was like, I gotta show how I'm doing so people like want to work with me because they know that like I have a great life and like blah blah blah. But I struggle too. Some days I don't want to work, some days I don't want to show up, some days I go through flares. That's the other thing too. Whenever I'm around my parents, I flare. And it like makes so much more sense now because it's like the trauma and all that's happened since I was young. And not to forget, now that I'm going through all this emotions and like healing and the self-worth and the identity crisis and all of this, my eczema has always been related to my emotions and how I feel about myself. Also, this applies to a lot of people too. I see this exact same thing in my clients. Again, like I shared earlier in the episode, when you're going through something and you feel some type of way about your journey, about yourself, about your skin, other people are also experiencing the same thing. So I'm sure this episode is something that might hit home for a lot of you guys. If it does, by the way, please let me know. It's hard for me to share these things. It's like, a lot of vulnerability and things that I went through this year and since I was a kid. So if it resonated with you, if you had a breakthrough and you're like, holy shit, this is the reason why I have eczema, this is why I feel lost this year, then let me know, because we're healing together and we're on this journey together. I'm not just someone that you follow because you're like, I want what she has. She has this great life of like living in Colombia and whatever you think, right? It's like, yeah, I am very grateful to finally understand my journey myself more. I'm very grateful to live in a beautiful place. I'm very grateful to not go through TSW anymore and be completely healed from that. But I'm also on another journey too, which is my self-love journey. Let's call that. I think that's all I have to say with this episode. That's my life. That's my childhood. I don't have any hate towards my parents at all. In fact, I always see everything as a learning experience and something for me to learn from and grow from. If I didn't go through that, I probably wouldn't have been able to start my business. It made me want to be driven to show my parents that I can be successful, even though it should never be like that. I should be successful for myself. But I know that I have tendencies to like prove people wrong, that I'm doing great, because I also had troubles in my high school and university years where people used to make fun of me and they used to throw me under the bus in university. Like my dietetics classmates, they were fucking cruel. They would like tattletale to the teachers about like me not performing and not doing well. These girls were like 23, 24. Some of them even in their 30s at that time. I was 22 at the time. That would throw me under the bus in university because I wasn't performing well enough. So with that too, it made me very want to always prove to people that I'm like doing well and being successful and things like that. So I understand why the way that I am because of all these experiences growing up. But never regret it. Never, why me? Like, why did this happen? I feel so much better understanding my journey and my childhood now because now I know what to work on for myself. I know this needs healing. I know this is why I'm struggling this year, but that's okay. That is part of growing as a person, becoming a better person, and I'm grateful for that. All right, I think that's what I'll have to say with this episode. I hope you found it helpful again. I'm getting really sweaty recording this office. There's no like fan here. So I will leave it at that. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for being a loyal follower. If you listen to my podcast regularly, and yeah, I really appreciate you. This is the only reason why I continue the podcast is for you guys and to help you. And if it did, that lights my day. That makes my day. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.